there's nothing greater than being in the local church
Yeah.
and discipling people. I love discipling people, helping people with their journey of discovering who God is and what he wants to do in their lives. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Framework Leadership, a podcast about principles and ideas you can use today to take your leadership to the next level. We are now exclusively a part of the SCU Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ken Engel, president of Southeastern University.
And I'm your co-host, Michael Steiner, Senior Vice President for Advancement and Innovation. And today is episode 1 of season 7.
Wow.
Can you believe 7 seasons?
I cannot believe it. It's flown by.
Framework Leadership, 7 seasons. And so, this podcast has started as kind of just our way to talk to the incredible people who've been part of our journey, who've been part of making Southeastern what it is today, second fastest growing private liberal arts university in the country. And we realized that one of the people whose journey that we need to know more about is yours.
Sure.
Got it.
Be happy to.
Yes. So today we want to kick off season 7, just really diving into, Dr. Engel, your leadership and how you got here and how we've been able to shape Southeastern and how, God's been able to use you in your life. So let's dive in.
Yeah. It's hard to believe this fall, starting my 14th year at the helm of this incredible university community.
Yes.
Yeah, time flies, but time flies when you're having fun doing what God calls you to do, and the impact that you get to have investing in these amazing students that come our way. Yeah,
and I think what's incredible about your story is, and a lot of people have this different, but if you had told 18-year-old Ken Engel that he was going to be a college president, he probably would have laughed.
Absolutely.
Right. So what? I mean, you started in broadcast journalism. So take us back to that beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, how your career started.
Well, I can tell you at 18, I just graduated from high school. It was 1980. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I really didn't know what career path I might head down. But I did have a lot of passions that I discovered in a variety of experiences in my life. And I do remember a mentor in my life in high school that taught me to always follow your design or follow the way you're wired, which would include your passions, your gifts, things like that. And if you kind of lean into those, that will give you direction as to what possible, careers, vocation you choose that you're a part of, or be able to recognize opportunities that come your way. So I didn't even know what college I wanted to go to, what I wanted to study, but I did know I had a couple of passions. One of those was communication. And especially in the broadcast field, I had been exposed when I was actually in junior high to play-by-play broadcast announcing. I had a chance to sit with Al Albert, who was the voice of the Denver Nuggets, and watch him do play-by-play for the Nuggets. And it was an incredible. Out of that, I got excited, and I thought, that's something I might like to do. And then the other thing is just working with people. Even in high school, I was involved in different ministries at our church and just enjoyed that. So I thought those are 2 areas that I would love to maybe pursue. But the best thing to do when you don't know exactly is to just plunge in and get education that will just help you overall.
Yeah.
And that's why I chose, we had an incredible community college just down the road from where we lived, Bakersfield Community College, and thought I'm going to enroll there and at least start my general ed requirements because I know everybody's got to take those no matter where you go. And I took a couple of elective classes as well, and the first elective class I took was broadcast writing, and the news director of the local NBC happened to be the professor.
There you go.
And so he was observing my work in that class, and I remember one day he came up and said, we have an internship opportunity at the station and would love to invite you to be a part of that if that's something you think you would do. And I really had to think about it for a whole 5 seconds.
Yes,
and I said, sure, yeah, let's do it. So went down and started. He asked me what area I'd love to kind of get into. And I said, well, sports. And so he signed me to the sports anchor, and basically for the next 4 months, day after day, he taught me what's involved in that. And Bakersfield market is a smaller market, which means you're going to do everything. Yeah. So you're going to do your editing, you're going to do your own writing, you're going to, all that kind of stuff. So he taught me all that, which was great. That's like a class, a degree in itself.
Right.
And I remember he got a new job in San Francisco, and I 18-year-olds are pretty confident,
right.
even though we all know that they're still learning and discovering. And but I thought I was pretty confident and I could do this job. So I actually went into the news director, who had been my professor, and said, I think I can do this. Would you give me an opportunity? And he kind of laughed and he said, well, I tell you what, I'll give you a chance. You can actually produce an entire show right here on the set. Yep. We'll record it and let's see. So so I did, and he actually hired me right on the spot and actually started me as the weekend sports anchor.
Come on.
And so just 18 years of age, and I'm on television, and it was pretty cool. But yeah, and then for the next 10 years of my life, that was my career. So,
well, and what's incredible about that, is I think so many students, they come to college, especially I've met with them, and there's a student I was mentoring recently, I'll make it concrete, and she was all bent out of shape because her professor said, okay, if you don't have 4 different internships at these different places, by the time you graduate, you're not going to be able to interview for here, you're not going to be able to land this job and all this kind of stuff. And I think so many students come to college with that pressure,
right?
That like, I have to have it all figured out, right, and I have to do all these things, and I have to sometimes, literally the student said, I know that I can't do what I'm passionate about right now because I have to do these other things in order to get to that spot. And we understand hard work, that's fine.
Right.
But there's something that God has where those passions are a gift.
Right.
And to lean into them and to grow and to grow into it and to take a shot. And I think that confidence, what you're saying, is something that I think is a very powerful thing for this generation to hear. What are some ways that they can do to have confidence in what they're doing right now? What does that mean for them to take up and take a confident step?
Yeah, I think confidence comes out of knowledge, wisdom, comes out of experience, and I think it comes out of ultimately connecting to, the phrase we use. It's in our mission statement here at Southeastern University, and that's discovering and developing your divine design. In other words, the way you are wired. And there's no greater opportunity than at a young age to start developing that awareness. And there are many things that you can do to discover that. I think part of it is the people that surround your life. Ask them what they've observed in you. Ask them what they see. The other thing is, they have all kinds of gift tests out there that can help you kind of pinpoint maybe some gifts you have. And then also, I think, look at all the different experiences you've gone through. Even though you're young, you still have grown up and had different experiences. And you kind of look at those and what were good ones, what were difficult ones, what were great experiences, and kind of then just put all those things together, and it just kind of helps you to build, wow, this is something I want to explore. This is something I want to head into, and then step in. You can step in then with confidence that at least you're on the right track.
Right.
And you'll be able to really discover what ultimately can be that opportunity that comes your way. And the more you discover your design, the more you will be able to step in the many opportunities. And I want to say you will have many opportunities come your way. And it will be important for you to be able to discern what should I step into, or how should I step into that. So I think those things help build
Yeah.
confidence, especially when you're kind of starting out.
Yeah, yeah, and this is a thing that's going to happen. We're going to see multiple times in your story. I've heard it many times, but that idea of if you can accept the fact that you might get a no, right? Or if you can accept the fact that, hey, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it happen. I think that's probably the
Right.
better way to phrase it, because this happens multiple times, right? Where people come into your story and say, oh, I don't know. Okay, maybe you've
Right.
never done this before, but you stepped into that where you said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. And when
Yeah.
you walk in there without that fear, where you say, you know what, I don't care. God's got me. God's on that kind of stuff. I'm going to do everything I can. So many opportunities
Yeah.
happen.
And what I love about studying Scripture, you discover throughout Scripture ways that can help you to solidify how to proceed with what God's doing in your life or the calling He may have for you. A passage I've always enjoyed reading is found in the book of Acts. I believe it's Acts chapter 16, and Paul. He's had this incredible transformation. He's now leading in ministry, if you will, and he wants to go out and start making a difference. And it says in that chapter that he tried to go to a certain location, and the Holy Spirit said no. Then he tried another one.
Right.
And the Holy Spirit said no.
Right.
Then he goes to the next one, and the Holy Spirit says yes. But in that instance, you don't see someone waiting
Right.
for God to confirm. It's you step out,
Yep.
and then God confirms. And so I think that's what, being at a young age, you have the opportunity to step out and try,
Huge.
discover, and see what happens, and then you'll know that again. You'll have that, and I believe it's that inner wiring that God gives us that allows us to recognize immediately, yeah, this is something I want to do.
Yep. And that Holy Spirit guided you through your whole career. And you had an amazing career. You went from 18-year-old getting a shot, and you were at the Olympics. Tell us a little bit about some of the stuff you got to do in that career.
Was able to be at the Olympics. That was kind of my first assignment there in Los Angeles. And, obviously that's a lifetime highlight. There's no doubt about that. And just having the Olympics right there in L.A., which they're going to be going back to L.A., I believe, in 28.
Cool.
But actually, 40 years ago. It was 40 years ago that happened. So it's hard to believe 40 years ago. But yeah, I mean, and I covered a lot of the track and field area, and that was a big moment for Carl Lewis, winning 4 gold medals. It was just an incredible, and then there was a lot of controversy there too. You had Mary Decker Slaney, who was running, and Zola Budd trips her up. And that was big controversy because she was expected to win.
Right.
And so, yeah, a lot of interesting things. Another cool thing, I was up in the booth at the Coliseum in Los Angeles, and President Reagan comes in, and he and his wife Nancy are sitting in the same booth. I mean, those kinds of things, you're just like, whoa, this is pretty exciting.
That's insane.
And it is. It really is. That, but again, it was the fact that I stepped into something that I was passionate about that allowed me to begin that journey.
Yep. And it's not like you could have predicted when you were 18 years old that you were going to end up in a booth with Ronald Reagan watching the Olympics, but it's just doing the best you can, bringing your best to what God had in that season, and then allowing God to lead you through it. And I think, you had a pretty powerful moment where your career shifted. Can you walk us through a little bit about what happened there?
Yeah. God always allows catalytic events in your life to shape you, to mold you, to, again, because He knows ultimately how He's going to use you. And sometimes they are events that wake you up, sometimes they are events that confirm, sometimes they are events that bring a whole new direction. And this kind of is what happened. And it happened, actually, it was through a tragic event in my life. My sister and her husband were ministry leaders in southern Missouri, and they'd only been married just a short time, and they were actually on an event with their youth group, and they had brought them home, and they were headed home after that, and they were only about a mile from their home, but part of where they were traveling was this curve that was always a dangerous curve anyway, but they were going around that curve, and a drunk driver came in the other lane and hit them head on, and they were both killed instantly.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is I was doing sports actually in Springfield, Missouri, not far from where they lived, and actually kind of heard what was happening over the. We have a scanner, that.
Police scanner
that
news,
we all in our newsroom, and was hearing about this accident and not realizing that it was actually my sister and her husband. But yeah, it was through that God just began to speak to me ultimately that He wanted to use me in ministry, that would have the most impact through my life to influence others in developing their relationship with God, and just felt led to, maybe ministry leadership is something I need to check into. But what was unique about that, and the reason why I always talk about make sure you are listening to the people around you, what are they saying? And it wasn't long after I started feeling that and contemplating about it, I get a call from my pastor, who was a pastor of mine when I was in college, and it was Dr. George Wood, who went on to be the general superintendent of Southern California, or of the Assemblies of God. He was in leadership in Southern California first, but called me out of the blue and said, "Kent, I think God's been dealing with you about ministry leadership, hasn't He?"
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't talked to him, and so that's sometimes how God works.
Right.
He's going to use people to speak to you, to influence you, and you need to recognize that, or bring confirmation, whatever that might be. And so, I mean, that alone was pretty much an incredible wake up.
Right.
That, yes, this is something God definitely wants to do, and He told us about a church that they were closing, but yet they wanted to kind of plant new in this particular area. And He said, "I know you, your gifts, your skills. I think you would be great at leading in that kind of environment." And so, and it was going to be brand new. So it was like you get to develop, which I love doing those kinds of things as well, kind of do something fresh and develop new ways to lead. For growth and success.
And to be super clear, this is before we have ARC. This is before we have all the church planting moment. I mean, this was where replanting and starting a brand new church was like, whoa, are you crazy?
Yeah.
Like, let's go. I mean,
this is now early 90s, about 10 years later.
Yeah.
So we felt, Karen and I felt that's what God had. And so we put together a team and went into Northwest Los Angeles and began to plant this new work, and literally built an amazing community. And actually we're there for 10 years.
Right.
So,
and during that time, that's when you also went back to school too. You got your master's, doctorate, needed all that kind of stuff. Talk to you've studied it before.
I always talk about this concept, stewardship of life. You need to be a good steward, and the Scripture is full of stories of what that means. Jesus talked about stewardship a lot, used different stories, the parable of the talents, parable of the vineyard. The talents are focusing on what God gives you. You need to invest, grow. That's what stewardship does. You're taking your life, you're taking what you're in charge of to another level. And like the parable of the vineyard actually has to do with gratitude and attitude. How do you approach what's in front of you? Because what you put into life is what you're going to get out of life. And but that's all about life stewardship. And part of stewardship is to be the best you can be. you need education. So now in ministry leadership, I have a journalism degree. I don't have anything connected to ministry leadership. I need to go back to school, but I didn't just go get any ministry degree. I wanted to focus on what are the things that would help me to now be a great ministry leader, a pastor.
Yep.
Three things that I came to mind: biblical studies. You got to you want to have knowledge of the Scripture.
Yep.
And the totality of what is that biblical narrative, and then you need church history and how it has unfolded and where we are and where we need to go, and then you need practical leadership. And so I found a program that had all of those dynamics, but the other thing that it had was experiential education. You were able to get into experiences as you're learning.
Yep.
Even a lot of the concepts in the class we were able to experience because we stepped out and did a variety of experiential things, and earned a master's in theological studies, and it changed everything. I mean, I so valuable to have that kind of education, and
it ultimately led you into going to DMin too, right?
So,
kind of into that
I
season.
loved it so much. I thought, man, I just want to continue my education and get as much as I can.
Yep.
So I did. I stepped into a doctoral program, and that was an incredible journey in and of itself, because in most of your, you do a dissertation, but a lot of times it's a project oriented that allows you to do research on what you're interested in.
Right.
I was able to apply it to our church.
Yep.
And it was just a great experience to earn that.
Yep. And what I love, and this is something that's going to come, is during the season, and this is, I think, a principle that you talked about earlier, but you also let yourself be known, right? So you let yourself be known by, all the way back at broadcast journalism, you let yourself be known by Dr. George Wood. And I think during this time, right, is where you met Dr. Don Argue as well.
Don Argue, and another very influential person, Dr. Mel Ming, who was the head of the graduate programming, and especially the DMin level at AGTS, and he was very instrumental. So that little did I know would open a door, because of my education, to step into education.
Yep.
And out of the blue, and again, if you look at the pattern in my life, I never sought after things.
Right.
So I didn't start out, I'm going to be this, or I'm going to be this. I just kind of followed my design.
Yep.
And followed the promptings.
Yep.
And, so out of the blue, I get a call from Mel talking to me about an opening at Northwest University. He was on the search committee, and he was my DMin, professor, who also had taken time to recognize my skill set. And he said, based on how I've observed you and your writing and all of the things that, I think you'd be great for this role. And he said, I've recommended you to the president. And that's when I began to develop a friendship with Dr. Argue, who was the president of Northwest. And he called. And I had known of Dr. Argue, but I had never really known him personally.
Right.
So, and what an incredible leader, Dr. Argue, a statesman. And so that process began to take place. And after pastoring for 13 years, we stepped into that role. And that was probably one of the hardest decisions. Because again, there's nothing greater than being in the local church and discipling people. I love discipling people, helping people with their journey of discovering who God is and what he wants to do in their lives. And I'm thinking, am I going to get to do that really?
Right.
But then I was awakened to the understanding that not only are you going to be serving, in discipleship ways, and yes, I love the local church, but now you get to exponentially affect the local church, because you're developing all kinds of leaders that are going to go and lead churches all over the world. And you talk about expansive opportunity. I mean, I just begin to step into that and thought, wow, what an exciting time.
Yeah.
And you were seeing a lot of it at that time. You were seeing a lot of explosive growth in the church.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Especially in the Northwest.
exactly.
I mean, that was
So,
Mars Hill, all that. I mean,
right.
this is the crazy
So to
time.
be able to develop leaders that would serve in those contexts, an amazing opportunity.
I love it. I love it. And so tell us a little bit about what you kind of learned during that experience that kind of has helped you now into your presidency. What were some of the ideas that you began to cultivate there? Because even there you had some new ideas you started bringing to education.
I discovered early on what students love and want is access to all kinds of education. Because again, when you're shaping someone's life, you're wanting to give them opportunity to experience different levels of knowledge and wisdom and experience. And it was out of that I started learning about how important it is to provide access. And so again, the opportunity. And what's also interesting, in everything I've stepped into, it's always been kind of to create something new, to create, I talk a lot about the sigmoid curve, which is all about recognizing that can be applied to life's journey. You're born, you start to grow, you learn, you step into new opportunity. The curve continues to ultimately where there's going to be death down the road somewhere, but that's what happens in a lot of organizational life. What you want to do is create ways to grow.
Yeah.
And that's what I have always had to step into, take something and really take it to another level. And at Northwest, we started doing that. When I went there as dean of the College of Ministry, they had no graduate programs at the time. It was just simply bachelor's degrees. They wanted to develop ministry leadership programs on the graduate level, practical programs, and so out of that, begin to discover ways to create more access for students to learn, to grow, and develop. And we were able to launch 2 or 3 graduate programs. The third component that I learned and discovered was so important is how do we not only educate these great students, but how do we get them into the local church even before they graduate?
Right.
So we started creating and thinking, kind of uniquely about how do we serve the church. So it was in that context that I learned those things that ultimately would shape the way I approach education, especially higher education. And it was a great journey, and we grew that college pretty tremendously.
And so if I can set the stage a little bit and you fill in the details where I mess up, because obviously I was not necessarily around during that time, but during
how old were you at that time?
We don't want, no, I was, yes, but I was not driving, that's for sure.
Okay.
So during all that time, and I was, I'm a Lakeland guy, so I was super familiar with Southeastern, especially, Dr. Mark Rutland. I think all of us, knows the incredible growth he brought the university through. But I remember when he left, because I had actually friends of mine who were in college working at our youth group were in college when he left. And so I was in high school at that point, but I remember when he left, I remember when they were like, oh man, I hope we get a new president soon. And a year goes by. 2 years goes by, this whole crazy thing. And I remember it was the biggest talk of the town, like, oh my gosh, how long are they going to take? And, he had set up so many great systems and different things like that, but 2 years, no leader, you're struggling. And so tell us a little bit about when you first the opportunity started coming around, because it's that same thread, right? Where people who had known you from your past said, hey, I know your gifts, I know your talents, and because I know you, I think this is a great opportunity for you.
What's interesting, and probably a lot of people don't know this because I don't think I've talked much about it, but when I was at Northwest, I actually came down to Southeastern to observe some of their leadership development. They had an incredible program, nights and weekends, education, degree completion programs, things like that we were thinking about creating and designing, and I actually came down to observe some of that here. So that's how I kind of knew a little bit about Southeastern, and of course Southeastern being a sister school to to Northwest University. So when Dr. Rutland left, and people, started speculating as to what kind of leader can follow him because he's pretty charismatic,
Yep.
Strong leader. It was interesting to watch that process, but never had any.
Right.
I'm not going to have an opportunity like that. I mean, my goodness, that's an incredible university, but again, just out of the blue, I get a phone call. In fact, I was driving to a local church event that I was going to be leading there in the Northwest, and as I'm driving, I get this call, and I'm the head of the search committee at Southeastern University, and your name's been given to us, and we just love to have a conversation. Wow. And so I'm like in shock, and so so that's how that process started, and it was actually about I would say a good 10-month process.
Yep.
And actually, in that process, was rejected.
Right. I was about to say.
The first go around.
I was about to say, you were rejected the first go around.
A lot of people don't know that.
No, first time.
So it was started in April, March, April of let's see, that would have been 2010.
Yeah.
And and so they flew me down to meet the search committee, flew into Orlando, and we gathered there, and it was a grilling, probably 3-4 hours. And so after that, I thought I did all right, and stepped. It was actually at the airport was where the meeting was, and I had to catch a flight back home, and I was actually just got through the gate, and they called back and said, are you still around? We'd love to talk to you again.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't have tons of time, but I went back to where the meeting was, and they said, we just feel like you're going to be the next president.
Yeah.
And we'd like to bring you down, in June and check out everything. And so Karen and I came in June and toured the campus. Nobody's around it. And it was still kind of hush-hush because we're still kind of in that interview process. And I remember Terry Rayburn kind of was leading the trip, and he took us all around to possible housing and things like that. So, I mean, I'm thinking this thing's rolling fast.
This is it. We're in.
And I'm still kind of in shock about it. And so get back and thinking we're about to transition. And 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from the chairman of the search committee and said, you know what, we've decided you're not going to be our candidate for president. Yeah. So I was like, well, you know what? God knows. And that's part of that, that I talked about earlier, that you just step out. I've always taken every call, every opportunity, and kind of walked through it. If it's God's will, great. If it's not, it's just another experience.
Right.
And
the big thing I want to just camp on for a second here for students to recognize is it's not about going out and seeking and walking. It's about doing so good with what is in front of you, being a good steward of your life with what God is in front of you, so that the opportunities come. God can bring them to you, and it's natural to step out. And I think so many students get so caught up about, where am I going to get my opportunities, when it's just do the best you can with what's in front of you.
Yeah. And so, so that was in June. I'm now having to gear back up for the new fall at Northwest, and it was not easy. But you know what was weird is Karen and I felt like we were supposed to be there. Just had that feeling that, but God, if this is not, we want to be obedient to that. It was in August, late August, get a call from the chairman of that search committee again and said, you know what, we want to reconsider and have you talk to us again. I was, surprised, and I go, well, again, I always walk through the door. So I said, sure. So he said, I'll get back to you and we'll bring you down. And so probably 2-3 weeks went by before I heard from him again. And then he called me, and now it's September. He said, I hate to inform you, but it's just been a mess here, and they've dissolved the first search committee, and they're now creating a new one, and I'm actually no longer going to be the chair.
Wow.
He goes, I don't know what they're going to do, so sorry about, all of that. I'm like, good grief, what's going on
two
down
rejections
there?
or one quasi. That's what it feels like.
And so I just put it behind me and just stepped into what I'm doing. And so, but then in November, I get a call from the new chair, who happened to be Pastor Wayne Blackburn, and said, I'm the new chair. And again, your name was on our list, and we want to talk to you. We want to bring you down here in a couple weeks. And my first question, are you zeroing in on me, or are you going to be talking to lots of people?
Right.
And he said, well, we're going to talk to lots of people. I said, well, that's all right. I'll be happy to step in.
Yep.
So it was the Monday, I'll never forget, the Monday after Thanksgiving, 2010. And I went down there, and it was a 5-hour meeting.
Yep.
We met in Atlanta, and I'll never forget, it started, we were about an hour and a half in, and Pastor Blackburn said, I need you to step out of the room. So I thought, okay, because we're in the midst of talking.
Right.
And I stepped out, and I'm thinking either I was doing really bad or I don't know. And I was out there for probably 15, 20 minutes, and he called me back in, and he goes, we're going to really put you in the frying pan.
Okay.
I said, you better hold on, because we're, and he had assigned different people. He says, all right, here's how we're doing it. And here's how we're going to go. And
if you know Pastor Blackburn, I can see his face. I know exactly how he's doing it. Yeah.
It's like, this is a fire round now. And, but what was fascinating to me is before I had come down, I had taken time to journal and pray, and I jotted down several things that if I had the opportunity to lead at that kind of level, what would I do?
Wow.
The questions they specifically ask hit those exact things that I feel like God had prepared me to answer. And we went another couple of hours. And by the way, they had this search committee added faculty.
Okay.
And Dr. Hackett was there, and Dr. Hazelbaker, Larry Hazelbaker was part of that. And I soon discovered Dr. Hackett can get pretty emotional and tears easily moved, and you could sense his heart.
It happens when you're that close to God.
Yes,
when you're as close to God as sharing a birthday. He gets
I gave this answer, and he just began to, weep, and it was like, again, God knew. So again, a couple of hours, and Dr. Blackburn said, I need you to step back out. So I'm thinking, this is kind of weird, but I did, and 15 minutes later, he comes to me in. They're all standing and clapping, and they said, we know without a doubt you're the next president.
Wow.
And we want to now introduce you to the entire community. And he said, when do you think you can do this? This was, again, right after Thanksgiving. I said, well, we're about to finish out the semester. You got the holidays. I said, let's plan for this in January. No, he said, nope, we're not doing that. He says, we're going to have this done by the 15th. I'm like, oh my goodness. That's like just in 2 weeks away.
Classic Pastor Blackburn. Pastor Blackburn, for sure.
So they brought us down here to Lakeland, announced that we were the candidate, and we spent 3 days. I'll never forget the most grueling days of my life, actually, because we were on Seattle time. We got in, and our first meeting was at 7 a.m., which would have been 4 a.m. our time. Yeah. And so it was early, and we went all day. We started at 7 a.m. and I didn't finish the meetings until 10 p.m. that night. And I was meeting every constituency group you can imagine, finishing the day with pastors in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And it was unbelievable. Second day, same thing. More interviews, and then the final day was the board having their meeting and their time, the full board, to ask all kinds of questions. And then at that board meeting, they had me step out, and they brought me back in, and they said it was unanimous, and we voted that you are the next president, and the rest is history.
Here we are. And there's one moment during that, and we'll wrap it up. But I want to end on this story. Is there's one moment that happened during that interview process that has been kind of the defining story for your leadership. It's where framework leadership came from. It's how we start the framing process. Tell us a little bit about what happened when you're being interviewed by the faculty and they ask you, what's your vision?
Well, everybody, every group, it didn't matter who I met with, from students to faculty to staff, but I knew the faculty one would be significant. But the question right out of the gate in all of them, what's your vision?
Yeah.
How are you going to change this university? Because they were going, they had gone 2 years, as you mentioned, without a president. So obviously, during that 2 years, they suffered through that. They lost many, many, many students in enrollment. Financially, they were struggling. And so they're wanting to hear from this new president, possibly, what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And I just simply answered, because it's a principle that I discovered in my life that is important, and that I just simply said, I don't have one. Mm-hmm. And especially in the faculty, because I knew they'd be the toughest group to, because they're brilliant, they're smart, they really take time to assess everything, and to see their faces, like, what did you just say?
Right.
I mean, I could tell right now that, it's over now. I'm not going to be the president.
Right.
But then I just began to explain the principle, and it's actually a principle that it's in the book Good to Great, actually, and it's a principle that focuses on the potential of an organization. And it says the potential of an organization, it comes through the potential of the people.
Yeah.
So for that to happen, there's one thing you have to do. You have to listen to them.
Yeah.
You have to learn from them. You have to discover who they are, because everything is done by, with, and through people. Mm-hmm. That's what leadership is all about. It's discovering the people you have the privilege to serve. What are their gifts? What are their experiences that, because they have joined together, can take this organization, this university, to a new level?
Yep.
So I said, we're going to take the time to listen. And once we listen, then we can begin to articulate the right vision, the perfect vision that will lead this university to a new level of growth.
Yep.
And of course, that's what we did. We started the first listening exercise I think the university ever had, honestly.
Right.
And it was a large one, and it took time, but it was worth it. And out of that, we were able to create a new strategy to help us grow.
Yep. And that framework, that really has followed you your entire life, your entire career, of listening, stewarding the opportunities in front of you, and then stepping into what God calls you, is kind of how we've, that's marked your leadership here at Southeastern. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk more about that, some of the different things, where we fit as far as the national landscape and where the future of education is going and all that kind of stuff. But just to start off the season 7, we wanted to make sure that we understood where we came from and what our foundation is. So, Kent, thanks for sharing your story today.
Yeah, privilege.
Love it. Love it. So if you make sure you join us for the next 2 weeks, if you're a faithful framework leadership follower, check us out, keep us up, share it with some of your friends. This is a great time to start season 7 to let some people know about some of the leadership principles we have today. And thank you so much for joining us. And if you want to stay up to date with Dr. Engel, you can follow him on website kentingle.com. You can also follow us on X at Kent Engel, on Instagram at Kent_Engel. Keep up with everything that God is doing here at the university. Take care, everybody.
Take care.